Why was a Navy SEAL standing at attention with a gun pressed to her temple? And why wasn't she afraid? The metal was cold against her skin. Not sharp, not heavy, just cold like the surface of the Pacific on a winter night. Commander Reeves' hand trembled, the muzzle of his M17 tracing the faintest movement against her temple as his voice cracked under the weight of his own threat. "Say one more word about those manifests," he hissed, "and I swear to God I'll end your career, or worse." Thora Brenvik didn't flinch. Not even her breath changed. She heard those words before: different voice, different place, a Syrian desert, a Taliban compound, a radio crackling under fire. The men who had once promised to kill her never got the chance to keep their word. Now here she was again, same feeling, same calm. Only this time, the enemy wore navy whites. The warehouse around them smelled of oil, salt, and dust, a forgotten corner of Naval Base Coronado. Pallets of equipment cast long shadows under the fluorescent lights. It wasn't supposed to exist, any of it. And she wasn't supposed to find it. But she had. And that was the problem. Outside, the waves struck the shore in a steady rhythm, the same rhythm she'd counted during Hell Week years ago, when the Pacific had tried to take her life 100 times and failed. Those waves had broken weaker men. They hadn't broken her. Reeves thought a gun would. He didn't know Thora Brenvik. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled. "Put that pistol to my temple and pull the trigger, Commander. I've got nothing left to lose anyway." The tremor in his hand deepened. He wasn't expecting defiance, not from her, not from a woman. He thought intimidation would work. That rank would protect him. That she'd fold the way he'd seen others fold before, the way corruption expected obedience. But she wasn't built to obey fear. 8 years of special warfare had burned that instinct out of her. She'd been tested in every way a human being could be tested: physically, mentally, morally. The trident on her chest wasn't just metal. It was proof that she had already died once and come back, shaped by pain, molded by fire. She looked into his eyes, the pale, trembling blue of a man who'd never seen war. He saw a sailor. But the ocean had raised something else. Thora Brenvik had grown up in Kodiak, Alaska. Her mother, a bush pilot. Her father, a fisherman. Her childhood smelled of diesel fuel and salt spray, of cold winds and harder days. The Bering Sea was her first instructor in survival. When she was 14, a storm rolled in faster than the forecast predicted. Their trawler capsized. She dragged her little brother through 40-degree water for 3 hours, keeping his head above the waves until the Coast Guard found them. Her father didn't make it. Hypothermia claimed him 20 minutes before rescue. That night rewired her heart. Something broke, something else hardened. Discipline became her language, structure her salvation. She joined the Navy at 19, not out of patriotism, not out of adventure, but because she needed to find something that hurt less than memory. When the Pentagon announced that Bud S was open to women, she was already halfway through dive school. Her instructors laughed. Her classmates bet money she wouldn't last a week. She didn't argue, she didn't talk back. She just kept running. Stress fractures split her shins. She taped them, kept moving. Bruises darkened her skin like old ink. She ignored them. Pain was a whisper, easy to silence when you'd already screamed yourself empty years ago. She failed twice, got rolled back both times. But quitting, that word didn't exist in the Brenvik dictionary. On graduation day, her mother flew down from Alaska, her hands weathered from decades of flying in the cold. She pinned the trident on Thora's uniform and whispered in Norwegian, "The strongest steel goes through the hottest fire." That was the last time Thora saw her brother's face in person, the same week his unit deployed to Afghanistan. 2 months later, she got the call. IED, 173rd Airborne, no survivors. Grief didn't hit her like a wave. It came quietly. A dull ache in the ribs that never really went away. She promised herself one thing after that. She'd never let cowardice or corruption take another life if she could stop it. And now, here she was, in a warehouse, staring down the barrel of a commander's pistol, realizing that the same kind of corruption her brother died fighting was standing 3 feet in front of her, wearing the same uniform she'd nearly died earning. The first time she'd seen the discrepancies, she thought it was a clerical error. The second time, a coincidence. The third time she knew. 30% of their gear missing. Night vision devices, plate carriers, SR-25 sniper rifles. All marked as training losses. She followed protocol, reported to Senior Chief Cord her platoon's old warhorse. He told her to document everything, follow the chain. She did. Right up to Commander Reeves. He'd smiled then, too wide, too calm, and told her to leave supply investigations to supply officers. But behind that calm she'd seen something flicker, recognition, fear. 3 days later, she was reassigned to admin duties. She refused. The next morning, she found an unsigned memo in her inbox recommending a mental health evaluation. Classic tactic, silence by paperwork. So when Reeves called her in after hours for a classified briefing, she already knew it was bait. She walked into the trap anyway. Because she wasn't alone. The wire tape beneath her ribs hummed faintly, Special Agent Morales, voice a whisper in her earpiece. Keep him talking, Brenvik. We need him on record. Now, as the commander's voice rose and cracked, she could hear her own pulse slow. It was the same calm that came before a high-altitude jump, the suspended moment when gravity hadn't won yet. He stepped closer, breath hot with fear. You're going to sign a statement, say you were mistaken, say you misread the manifests. Silence. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched him crumble under his own lie. Inside her chest, something steady and cold turned over, not rage, not fear, but a kind of pity. Men like him thought power came from weapons and rank. They never understood the kind of power that came from surviving. Her mind flicked back, flash images. Her brother's folded flag. Her father's compass. Her mother's voice on the phone, proud but tired. And beneath it all, the whisper that had carried her through drownings, through exhaustion, through every bruise that never healed. Don't break, don't give them that. Reeves sneered. Nobody believes female SEALs anyway. They'll say you cracked under pressure, couldn't handle the boys' club. That was his mistake, thinking shame was stronger than conviction. The hum in her earpiece grew louder, Morales again. Stand by, Thora. Quick reaction forces in position. She caught the faint vibration of diesel engines outside, HMMWVs, close. The timing was perfect. But Reeves wasn't paying attention. He was unraveling. He leaned in, whispering like poison. You want your mother to lose her daughter too, because accidents happen, especially in training. And just like that, he crossed the line. The moment he mentioned her mother, something in Thora Brenvik's body moved on instinct. A shift in balance, a flash of movement. Her left hand swept up, trapping his wrist. Right hand, open palm into his solar plexus, full force. The pistol fired once, the shot echoing into the steel ceiling as she rotated his arm, momentum folding him into the floor. The weapon skittered away. He gasped, the sound of air leaving a man who'd never learned what pain feels like. 2 shadows moved behind him, civilian contractors. She recognized them, mercs. They reached for their belts, where concealed weapons sat ready. She didn't think, didn't need to. She was already moving. 4 seconds. That's all it took. Knee to groin. Elbow to throat. Thumb break. Wall impact. Both men down, no hesitation. Training made sure of that. When the warehouse doors exploded open, she was already standing, the M17 cleared and safe in her hand, barrel down, trigger finger straight. Proper form even now. Floodlights poured in. U.S. Navy, drop your weapons. Dozens of master-at-arms and NCIS agents stormed in. Senior Chief Cord followed close behind, his face unreadable. Thora raised her hand slowly, weapon dangling loosely by the trigger guard. Her voice was calm, almost serene. NCIS has been recording everything, she said, pulling her shirt slightly to reveal the transmitter. Special Agent Morales authorized this operation 3 days ago. Reeves tried to speak, blood bubbling at his lip, but nothing came out. You thought I came here alone, she said quietly. You thought I'd walk into an ambush without overwatch. Her eyes met his. I'm a SEAL, Commander. We never go anywhere alone. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that comes only after justice meets truth. Hours later, after the reports were filed and the handcuffs clinked shut, Thora stood outside the warehouse, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. The air smelled of salt and diesel, same as it had that morning in Alaska when her father didn't come back. She didn't cry, she never did. But somewhere deep down, beneath the layers of armor and scars, a small part of her grieved, not for him, not even for herself, but for the idea that people in uniform could still choose greed over honor. She survived war, drowning, and loss. But this betrayal, felt heavier than any rucksack she'd ever carried. Still, she stood straight. Because dignity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to kneel. Why did the silence afterward feel louder than the gunshot? The report was done, the evidence logged, the commander in custody. And yet, standing in that fluorescent-lit NCIS office hours later, Thora Brenvik felt nothing. Not triumph. Not relief. Just silence, the kind that hums behind your ribs when adrenaline leaves and the body starts remembering pain again. A cup of coffee sat untouched on the metal table. Across from her, Special Agent Morales flipped through photographs of the warehouse, each one colder than the last. $3 million in missing equipment, he said, voice flat, analytical. Reeves wasn't the top, not even close, he was just convenient. Thora nodded, eyes on the photos. NVGs, plate carriers, rifles. She saw them not as numbers or property tags, but as lives, as the difference between survival and a folded flag. Do you think he was selling directly to insurgents? She asked quietly. Morales exhaled through his nose. No, this stuff's too traceable. We're thinking private contractors, off-the-books deals, a bigger ring. She looked up. The air between them was heavy, not with tension but understanding. This was the military's quiet disease, corruption that fed on the system's own discipline. Morales closed the file. You did good work, Chief. Most people wouldn't walk into that situation. Thora didn't answer. Good wasn't a word she associated with violence, even justified violence. Killing the threat wasn't victory, it was maintenance. A temporary patch on a wound that never healed. Outside, dawn was breaking over Coronado. The Pacific shimmered like glass, the kind of beauty that mocked exhaustion. By the time she stepped out of the building, the base was already alive. Sailors on morning runs, aircraft in the distance, the rhythm of discipline continuing, indifferent to what had happened overnight. Thora pulled her jacket tighter. The metal they'd eventually pinned to her chest wouldn't mean much, not compared to the invisible one that already burned beneath her skin, the cost of integrity. She walked past the chow hall, where junior sailors were joking, heads down, unaware that one of their commanders was now in federal custody. She envied their innocence. But part of her knew it wouldn't last, not in this world. Her phone buzzed. A message from Senior Chief Cord. Check in at Supply HQ 900. New orders coming down. New orders. That phrase always sounded like hope, until you realized it rarely meant anything good. At 900, she walked into the Supply HQ. Cord was waiting, coffee in hand, the lines in his face deeper than usual. He gestured to the chair. Sit, Chief. She sat. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old paper. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I won't sugarcoat it. NCIS is grateful. Command. Not. Thora raised an eyebrow. Not. You embarrassed an officer in uniform, Brenvik. Exposed a theft ring on base property. There's a review coming down. Formal inquiry. Her jaw tightened. A review for doing my job. He met her eyes steady. You know how this works, politics over justice. They'll call it standard procedure. Silence. The kind of silence that thickens the air between people who both understand the truth, but can't say it out loud. She looked away. Command wants quiet, she said finally. He nodded. They always do. That night she went home to her off-base apartment, small, clean, nothing fancy. There were only 3 things on her desk. A photo from her Trident ceremony. A folded flag. And her father's old compass, the brass dulled by salt and time. She turned it slowly in her hand, the needle trembling toward north, always north. Even when storms came, even when everything else spun, it held steady. She wished she could say the same for herself. The news hadn't broken yet, it would soon. She'd seen it before: leaks, speculation, the social media vultures circling. They'd call her brave, or reckless, or dangerous. Maybe all 3. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. In the quiet she heard her brother's voice, faint, like memory through fog. Don't let them tell you what your honor's worth, Thora. She closed her eyes. He said that the day before he deployed. The day before he stopped replying to her messages. The day before she learned what silence really meant. 2 weeks passed. The official review came. Cleared of wrongdoing, commended for courage. But the message was clear between the lines: they wanted her gone, transferred. Out of sight, out of story. When she met Morales again at NCIS headquarters, he handed her a new file. We're moving you to a classified unit for the time being, he said. Think of it as temporary shelter. Shelter, she almost smiled. That's one word for it. He didn't return the smile. You pissed off the wrong people. You embarrassed the right ones. That's a dangerous combination. She skimmed the file. A transfer to Virginia Beach, training assignment, low visibility. You're moving me off the chessboard, she said. He didn't deny it. Sometimes survival is strategy. That night she stood by the water again, the Pacific whispering in the dark. The same sea that had nearly taken her life now reflected the stars, quiet and infinite. She thought about her students, the younger SEAL candidates who'd started to believe that women could wear the trident. Would they still believe it after seeing how their own command treated one of them? Her throat tightened. Cord's words echoed back, politics over justice. Maybe, but politics didn't bleed, justice did. Weeks turned into months. Virginia Beach was colder, less forgiving. She was assigned to the training compound, teaching close-quarters combat. On paper, it was a position of respect. In truth, it was exile. Most days she didn't mind. The rhythm of training kept her steady. Wake up, run, teach, eat, sleep, repeat. Repetition dulled pain. Discipline disguised loneliness. But at night, when the base went silent, the ghosts came back. Reeves' trembling hand. Her brother's laugh. Her father's compass. Her mother's last words. The strongest steel goes through the hottest fire. She understood it now. The fire wasn't the test, it was the teacher. and she wasn't done learning. One evening, while the students practiced breech drills, a young candidate approached her, barely 20, nervous, eyes full of the same defiance she'd once carried. "Chief Brenvik," the girl said, voice uncertain, "can I ask you something?" Thora nodded. "Is it true about what happened in Coronado?" The question hung there. The sound of gunfire from the training range echoed in the distance. Thora looked at her, this kid trying to survive in a system that still whispered against her. "Depends what you've heard," Thora said. "They said a commander pulled a gun on you, and you didn't even blink." A pause, then a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Yeah," Thora said softly, "something like that." The trainee hesitated. "Were you scared?" That one she didn't answer right away. She thought about it, really thought about it. "Fear's not the enemy," she said finally. "It's the reminder that you're still human. What matters is what you do while it's sitting in your chest." The girl nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long time, Thora saw it: belief. Raw, uncertain, but real. After the girl left, Thora sat alone on the training bench, the smell of gun oil and sweat heavy in the air. She let the silence settle again, this time not as punishment but as peace. Weeks later, Morales called. "We traced the stolen equipment," he said. "Southeast Asia, private contractors, some of it's showing up in the black market." Her stomach tightened. Reeves had partners. "Dozens," Morales said, "maybe more." Thora closed her eyes. Of course, it was never just one man. Rot never stops at the surface. It spreads quiet, patient, corrosive. "What do you need?" she asked. He hesitated. "You sure you want back in? You've already paid your price." Her answer came without thought. "Justice isn't a price, Morales, it's a debt." That night, she opened her father's compass again. The needle trembled, finding north. She smiled just a little. The fire was calling again. And this time, she wasn't just walking into it. She was going to burn the rot out from the inside. Because sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do isn't to pull the trigger, but to stand in the light when everyone else prefers the dark. Why do some wars begin long after the shooting stops? The plane shuddered through gray skis as Thora Brenvik stared out the small oval window. Below, the Atlantic glimmered, endless, cold, unforgiving. She made this trip before, but not like this. Orders had come quietly, the kind with no return address and no ceremony. One folder, no insignia. Destination undisclosed. Mission, integration, and assessment. That's how they phrased it: clean, sterile. But she'd been in long enough to know what it meant. Somewhere, someone needed a problem erased without leaving fingerprints. When the C-130 touched down on a remote airstrip outside Norfolk, the morning fog was thick enough to swallow the horizon. Waiting at the tarmac was a single black SUV, engine idling. A man in civilian clothes stood beside it, tall, mid-40s, hair cut too short for a civilian, eyes too sharp for a bureaucrat. He didn't salute, didn't smile. Just said her name, Chief Brenvik. She nodded. "I'm Commander Eli Rourke. Welcome to Task Unit 9. His voice was calm, almost too calm. The kind that came from people who'd seen things and stopped flinching. He opened the door, and as the vehicle pulled away, Thora caught the faint smell of brine again, the Atlantic, following her east like an omen. Task Unit 9 wasn't on any base map. It wasn't supposed to be. It sat tucked behind an old hangar at a decommissioned airfield, a skeleton facility repurposed for operations no one talked about. Inside were people who didn't exist on rosters: soldiers, sailors, analysts, all pulled from different commands, working under one simple directive: stop the bleeding. On the walls hung no flags, no slogans, just silence and the faint hum of machinery. Rourke led her through the narrow corridor to a briefing room where 3 others waited. a Marine intel officer with a scar through his eyebrow, a former Army Ranger now wearing civilian clothes, and a woman in a black blouse who looked more like a professor than an operative. "This is your new team," Rourke said. "Your specialty's logistics trace. You'll find the leaks, the money trails, the missing gear." He slid a folder across the table. "Start with this." Thora opened it. Photos, invoices, satellite imagery, all linked to the stolen equipment from Coronado, now appearing halfway across the world in the Philippines, then Myanmar, then Thailand. "Contractors," Rourke said quietly. "Private brokers are buying U.S. hardware and reselling it to whoever pays best. Guerrilla forces, cartel militias, even rogue intelligence fronts. Someone's feeding them from our own supply chains." Thora frowned. "And you want me to find who's doing it?" Rourke's gaze hardened. "No, I want you to prove it. So when the time comes, we don't just cut rot, we burn the whole tree." The room fell silent. Thora closed the folder and looked up. "Then let's start the fire." The next weeks blurred into one long cycle: data, analysis, long nights under flickering fluorescent lights. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't loud. But it was war, fought with spreadsheets and encrypted transmissions instead of rifles. Each shipment told a story. Each missing pallet whispered of betrayal. The deeper she went, the darker it got. A trail of falsified manifests led not just to field warehouses, but to supply offices inside U.S. installations, the very heart of the system. It wasn't just greed. It was organized, funded, protected. And every name she found made her stomach tighten. Because some of them weren't strangers. She recognized one, a logistics chief she'd served under in Syria. He'd been the one who gave her that first chance to prove herself. Now his name was tied to black market shipments through Singapore. That night she sat alone in the operations bay, lights dim, rain tapping the windows. The computer screen glowed pale against her face as she scrolled through manifests and bank transfers. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from something worse: disappointment. It wasn't supposed to be like this. They wore the same flag, swore the same oath. And yet here they were, selling out brothers and sisters for money that couldn't buy back a shred of honor. She closed the laptop and stared at the darkness. In the reflection, she barely recognized herself anymore. The stillness, the eyes that never softened, the way her shoulders stayed ready even when sitting still. Combat hadn't done that, betrayal had. "Couldn't sleep." The voice broke the silence. It was Rourke, leaning against the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. Thora didn't turn. Sleep overrated. He stepped inside, handed her a mug. "You've been at this 3 days straight." "Almost there," she said, eyes still on the screen. "The shipments out of Guam, they don't match the official manifests. I think I've found a broker pattern." He studied her for a long moment. "You're not like the others." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "I've heard that before." "I mean it," Rourke said. "Most people burn out or look away when they see how deep it goes. You just keep digging." Thora sipped her coffee, bitter and cold. "I stopped looking away a long time ago." Rourke nodded slowly. "That's what makes you dangerous." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, the higher-ups didn't want you here." She looked up. "Then why am I?" "Because the ones who did want you here are tired of pretending this machine runs clean." He left her with that, a statement and a warning wrapped in one. 3 weeks later, they got their first break. An intercepted transmission out of Manila. Encrypted cargo logs matching serial numbers from Coronado, her old base. Same pattern, same missing rifles. Only this time, the destination wasn't a war zone. It was domestic. A private training facility in Texas, registered under a shell company owned by a defense contractor with political ties. When Rourke laid out the file, The room went still. This wasn't just theft, it was treason wrapped in paperwork. Thora looked over the images, warehouses, shipping containers, flight manifests. And one name at the bottom of the authorization form caught her eye. "Commander Reeves," she said quietly. Rourke frowned. "Impossible, he's in Leavenworth." "Maybe," she said, "but someone's still using his credentials." Rourke stared at her, realization dawning. They kept his login alive. "Exactly," Thora said. "And whoever's behind this is betting that nobody would check a disgraced officer's credentials. Smart. Invisible." Rourke nodded. "You'll lead the recon." She blinked at me. "You found it, you know the pattern. You'll verify it in person." Her heartbeat slowed, not fear but focus. "I'll need a team." "Already assigned," he said. "You leave tomorrow." The plane to Texas was small, unmarked, crewed by people who didn't exist. Thora sat by the window again, the familiar vibration under her boots. Same feeling as before deployment, the quiet before something irreversible. When they landed near San Angelo, dusk was fading into the flat horizon. Wind carried dust and the smell of dry grass. Ahead the compound rose like a ghost, plain buildings, fences, no signage. A training facility, they called it. Rourke's voice came through her earpiece. "Minimal engagement. Get eyes, get proof, get out." She smiled faintly. "Copy that." They moved under cover of darkness, 5 operatives in civilian tactical gear. Thora led, moving silently through the field, the sound of crickets loud in the still air. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of her breath. One step, one thought, one mission. The compound was lightly guarded, cameras on corners, a single truck by the gate. No insignia, no flags. That was the tell, when no one wanted to be seen. She slipped through a side fence and reached the main warehouse. The door was unlocked, too easy. Inside, crates. Stacks of them, marked for training use only. She wiped the dust off one and saw the stenciled label beneath. "Property of U.S. Navy, DVGRU." Her chest went cold. Her old unit's gear. The same shipment she'd logged 2 years ago. Her radio clicked softly. "You seeing this, Brenvik?" "Yeah," she whispered. "They didn't just steal equipment, they stole our identity." She crouched, opening a crate. Inside were rifles, ammo, encrypted comms devices, and beneath them, something worse. Documents, shipping manifests, authorization orders. All signed with Reeves' ID. It wasn't just old corruption, it was still alive. Then came the sound. A crunch of gravel outside. Voices, 2 men, close. Thora froze, instinct kicking in, slow breath, slow movement. She glanced at her watch camera, still transmitting. Proof secured. She started to back toward the door when one of the men spoke. "Leave it open. They're picking up the next batch tomorrow." She caught a name, a code name she hadn't heard in years. Project Dagger. Her stomach dropped. That wasn't supply. That was covert warfare. She slipped out the side door, the night swallowing her whole, and whispered into the comm, "Rourke, we've got a bigger problem. Project Dagger's still active." Static, then his voice tight. "Get out Brenvik now." By the time she reached the extraction point, the air smelled like rain again. Helicopter lights flashed in the distance. Her pulse steadied. But deep inside, something had changed. This wasn't just corruption anymore. It was conspiracy, rooted deep, maybe higher than she could reach. As the rotors thundered overhead, she looked back at the dark silhouette of the compound fading below. The compass in her pocket trembled with emotion. North, always north. Even when the truth pointed south. And for the first time, Thora Brenvik realized, maybe the enemy wasn't across the ocean anymore. Maybe it was wearing the same uniform she still swore to protect. What happens when the enemy looks like you, talks like you, and salutes the same flag? The helicopter blade slowed to silence as dawn crept across the Virginia coast. Thora Brenvik sat in the debriefing room of Task Unit 9, dirt still on her boots, her pulse still echoing from the night before. She hadn't even taken off her gear. The files, the photographs, the proof, everything was laid out on the table in front of her like evidence in a courtroom no one wanted to hold. Commander Rourke stood at the far end of the room, hands on the back of a chair, eyes locked on the images. The air was heavy. Not from smoke, not from fear, just from truth. They were running it under Reeves' login, Thora said, her voice low, calm. The crates had DEVGRU property codes, my old unit's inventory. This isn't rogue contractors. This is organized. Rourke didn't speak at first. He just stared at the photo of the manifest, his jaw tightening. Finally, he said, Project Dagger. I thought that name died 10 years ago. It didn't, Thora replied. It's alive, breathing, someone keeping it that way. Rourke looked up slowly. You realize what that means, right? If Dagger's still operational, it's not just theft, it's sanctioned. The room fell silent again, except for the faint buzz of the overhead light. Thora took a breath. Then who's sanctioning it? Rourke looked away. People with more stars on their collars than we have time to count. Later that night, the rain came again. Virginia storms were different than Alaskan ones, warmer, softer, but the sound against the window still carried memory. Thora sat in her quarters, the compass open on her desk. The needle shook faintly with each rumble of thunder. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crates again, the stenciled letters, the stolen trident symbols. Her trident, her brothers, her friends. It felt like someone had taken the honor they'd bled for and sold it to the highest bidder. Her phone buzzed once, a secure message. Rourke, you're not wrong, keep quiet for now, eyes are on us. She stared at the words for a long time before locking the screen. Eyes are on us. That sentence carried a weight she knew too well. Not just surveillance, but suspicion. The kind that didn't stop at the truth. The kind that erased people when the truth got too loud. The next morning, she found Rourke in the hangar bay. He was talking to someone, a tall man in a dark suit, the kind who moved like a shadow that didn't belong in daylight. Thora slowed her pace, watching. The man handed Rourke a folder, whispered something too quiet to hear, then left through the side door without looking back. When Rourke turned and saw her, something flickered in his expression. Fatigue, maybe guilt, maybe both. Who was that? She asked. Command liaison, he said too quickly. She folded her arms. You mean handler? He didn't answer, just exhaled. Brenvik, he said finally, you need to understand something. The kind of people who keep programs like Dagger alive, they don't scare easily. They bury things. People too. She met his eyes. Then we dig faster. He almost smiled, but it faded. You think this is about justice. It's not. It's about control. She tilted her head slightly. And whose side are we on, Commander? He didn't answer. That told her everything. Over the following weeks, small things started to shift. Her access badges stopped working on certain terminals. Briefing invitations no longer included her. Files she'd uploaded vanished from the shared drive. Once she caught two Intel techs whispering as she entered the room, conversations cutting off mid-sentence. When she confronted one of them, the kid looked pale. Ma'am, he stammered, they told us to limit your data clearance, said it was temporary. Who told you? He swallowed hard. Internal directive, no names. She nodded slowly, keeping her voice calm. Understood. But inside, the temperature dropped. This was how it started, the quiet freeze-out before the fall. You weren't fired, you weren't demoted, you were just erased. One night, she sat in the operations bay, long after everyone had gone. She couldn't let it go, couldn't stop. If Dagger was alive, it meant missions, illegal ones, maybe assassinations, maybe worse. She pulled up archived, encrypted traffic, lines of code scrolling across her screen like static. Then one familiar word caught her eye: Kodiak. Her breath caught. Her hometown. A ghost file buried in metadata. She opened it. The coordinates were in Alaska, northern sector, a research station long abandoned. Attached was a manifest. And a name. Subject Thora Brenvik, flagged for observation. Her hand froze on the mouse. Her name in their system. They were watching her. She backed out of the file and wiped traces from the log. Then sat still for a long time, listening to her own pulse. They didn't just know who she was. They were using her history as part of something bigger, something personal. The next morning, she went to Rourke's office. He looked up from his desk, surprised. "You look like hell." "I found something," she said, sliding the printed document across his desk. "Kodiak file with my name on it." He glanced at it, then shut the folder fast. "Too fast." "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "I could ask you the same." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You weren't supposed to see that." "Then make me understand why it exists." He hesitated, then said, "When we pulled you into Task Unit 9, you were already on a list. Project Dagger tagged potential assets years ago, people they thought could be manipulated or recruited if things went sideways." Her pulse quickened. "Assets, you mean surveillance targets?" He nodded once. "Your record, your training, your family ties, it made you a candidate. But when Reeves went down, they moved you from recruitment to containment." Containment. The word hit harder than the bullet ever could have. "So what am I now, Commander?" she asked. "A liability." He didn't answer. That was answer enough. That night she drove to the coast. Rain again. Always rain. She parked by the water, engine off. The only sound the slow crash of waves against rock. Her father's compass sat in her hand, catching flashes of lightning. North, always north. Even when everything else spun south. She thought about the oath she'd taken, the flag, the men and women she'd served beside. And she wondered, what would they think now? That one of their own was being hunted by the system they'd sworn to defend. Her reflection in the windshield looked almost calm. But her heart was burning. They'd used her loyalty as a leash. Now she was cutting it. The next morning, she walked into Task Unit 9 headquarters wearing her uniform, clean and pressed. She didn't sneak, she didn't hide. If they were watching, they'd see everything. Rourke looked up as she entered. "Thora." She cut him off. "I'm leaving." He froze. "That's not a request you get to make." "I'm not requesting," she said. "I'm done playing defense." He stood slowly. "You walk out now, you won't have protection. You know that, right?" "I never did," she said. "I just didn't realize it." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "You'll never outrun them." She paused at the door. "I'm not running, Commander. I'm exposing them." Their eyes met, her steady, his full of the kind of sorrow that comes from knowing he once believed in the same thing. By afternoon she was gone. Off base, off grid. She used routes only SEALs knew, secondary highways, forgotten airfields, dead drops still hidden in the woods of Carolina. The system had trained her too well, now it couldn't find her. She reached out to one person only, Special Agent Morales. When he picked up, his voice cracked with surprise. "Brenvik, Jesus, where the hell are you?" "Still in the fight," she said. "I need help." "Does this have to do with the Dagger leaks?" "Everything. They're not just stealing gear, Morales. They're running operations under false flags, using old SEAL IDs, mine included." He went quiet. You realize what you're saying? He asked. I'm saying the military's running black programs through private fronts, and anyone who gets close gets erased. Another long pause, then, I can't talk about this on this line. You already are, she said softly. Meet me in person. Hours later, in a quiet diner off Highway 58, Morales slid into the booth across from her. He looked older, worn, the kind of tired that comes from carrying secrets too long. He handed her a flash drive under the table. Encrypted files, some of them reference Dagger, others, go deeper, you didn't hear it from me. What's on them? Names, he said, and proof. She pocketed the drive, eyes steady. What happens if they catch me with this? He sighed. They'll call you rogue, maybe unstable, maybe a traitor. She nodded slowly. Then I'll give them something worth fearing. Outside, the rain stopped. The world felt still. And in that stillness, Thora Brenvik made a silent promise, not to revenge but to truth. Because there's a moment in every soldier's life when the uniform stops defining you, and your choices start doing it instead. She started the car. The compass needle trembled once, then steadied. North. Always north. When you disappear by choice, you learn who was really looking for you all along. The motel room smelled of stale air and bleach. Thora Brenvik sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, rain whispering against the cracked window. On the screen glowed a map, strings of data points stretching from Norfolk to Manila, from Texas to D.C. Every line was a vein. And somewhere in that body of lies, the heart was still beating. The flash drive Morales had given her hummed faintly in the port. Encrypted, compartmented, dangerous. She cracked the first layer of protection after 3 sleepless nights. Inside were names, operations, ghost budgets, falsified training authorizations. And then one folder that wasn't supposed to exist. Project Dagger / Executive Tier. She hesitated before opening it. The cursor blinked, waiting. When the files appeared, her pulse slowed, the way it always did before a firefight. Operation lists, covert funding transfers, coordinates matching foreign soil. And at the top, a single signature authorization. ADM J.S. Keller, Joint Chief of Naval Operations. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't just mid-level corruption anymore. This reached the very top. She closed the laptop, heartbeat loud in the quiet room. For the first time, she realized what she was actually holding, not evidence, but a loaded weapon made of truth. By morning, she was already moving. A rented sedan, 2 extra license plates, and a duffel of essentials. No cell, no credit cards, no electronic scent trail. Every movement calculated to look like absence. She drove south, following the coast through Carolina fog. Every mile bought her a little more time, but not safety. There was no safety anymore, not for people who knew too much. At a small diner off Route 17, she met Morales again, this time without uniforms, without badges. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Tell me you didn't open it, he said quietly, sliding into the booth. Thora stared back. I did. He exhaled, rubbing his face. Then we're both dead. Not yet. She handed him a printed list. This is every shipment tied to Dagger in the last 2 years. Some of those locations are active war zones. Others are U.S. soil. Morales scanned the page. Jesus, you have Keller's name on this. His authorization key. The files trace back to his command network. The money moves through private contractors. They're funding black ops off the books. He shook his head slowly. You can't leak this. Not yet. If you dump it online, they'll bury it under national security law before anyone reads a line. So what's the play? Find proof they can't discredit, something physical, something they can't deny. Thora leaned back. Where? He slid a small photograph across the table. A cargo jet, No markings taken at night. Site 12, he said, Northern Virginia, off-record storage for recovered ordnance. It's where Dagger moves their hardware before it disappears. You get inside that, you'll find everything. She studied the photo, then nodded once. Then that's where I go. Morales caught her wrist. Thora, they already think you're rogue. If you're caught, you won't get a trial. Her eyes met his. Then I won't get caught. The airfield sat hidden behind a line of pines and an empty sign that read Federal Training Property, no access. Beyond the fence, floodlights cut through mist, illuminating rows of hangars. Silent, orderly, secret. Thora parked a mile out and moved on foot, dark clothing, packed tight, hair bound. Every sound measured, every shadow trusted more than people ever could. When she reached the outer fence, she clipped the current with a grounding wire and slipped through the gap. The night smelled of jet fuel and wet concrete. A security truck passed, tires crunching gravel. She flattened herself behind a stack of crates, pulse steady. The driver didn't see her. Most never do. Eyes grow dull when they believe they're safe. She reached the nearest hangar. Through a crack in the metal doors, she saw them. Rows of sealed containers stamped with codes she recognized. The same stolen DEVGRU inventory numbers. And at the back, a single crate larger than the rest, padlocked, glowing faintly from a security panel. She slipped inside. The air was cold, humming with fluorescent light. Her fingers moved quickly, tools quiet against the padlock. A click, a breath. The lid lifted. Inside, weapons, comms arrays, stacks of classified field gear. But what froze her wasn't the equipment. It was the folder taped to the inside lid. Operation Kodiak, Field Initiation Protocol. Her hometown. Again. She opened it. Satellite images. A northern island off Alaska. Marked red. A notation in the corner. Candidate Brenvik, viability test / containment parameter. She stared until the letters blurred. It wasn't random. They'd used her, maybe her family, as part of an experimental assessment years ago. Every tragedy that shaped her path might not have been coincidence. A sound behind her broke the trance. Footsteps. She dropped the file, slipped behind a support beam. 2 men entered, voices low. Shipment leaves tomorrow. Keller wants it cleared before the audit. Does he know about the Kodiak cache? Of course he does. It's his insurance policy. They passed within feet of her. Their badges glinted, contractor emblems, private sector. The kind of ghosts that vanish with paperwork. When they left, she exhaled slowly. Then she did something she hadn't done since the war. She prayed not for herself, but for the truth to survive longer than she did. She copied what she could: photographs, serial numbers, Keller's authorization code. Then she set a timer on the internal security feed, 30 minutes before the next patrol cycle. By the time the alarm sounded, she was already gone. Her silhouette disappeared into the pines as the floodlights flared to life behind her. Back at the motel, dawn crept through the curtains as she connected the camera to her laptop. Images filled the screen. The hangar, the crates, the folder. Proof. But something felt off. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before someone knocks. A soft metallic click outside confirmed it. Car doors, not 1 but 2. She killed the lights, slid her pistol from her bag and crouched by the window. Dark SUVs, no plates. Voices outside. Room 23, positive heat signature. They'd found her. She grabbed the flash drive, slipped it into a waterproof pouch, and forced open the bathroom window. Rain had started again. Always rain. She dropped to the ground, landing silent, knees absorbing the impact. Footsteps thundered down the hallway behind her. She ran. The alley was narrow, slick, full of echoes. Headlights swept the corner. She ducked behind a dumpster, heart steady, breath shallow. Then an explosion of glass as they breached her door. Zhaozi. Clear the room. They wouldn't find her there anymore. Only an empty laptop and the faint hum of a compass spinning north. Hours later, miles away, she stopped in a gas station restroom to breathe. Her reflection stared back, rain-soaked, eyes burning, jaw set. She looked less like a seal and more like something wilder. Something the system couldn't name anymore. She placed the compass on the sink. The needle pointed north toward Kodiak. So that's where it ended. That's where it began. She wiped her face, straightened, and whispered to the mirror. Let's finish this. The drive north took days. Each one colder, lonelier, quieter. Morales called once through an encrypted line. They're painting you as unstable, he said. Rogue operator. Keller's already briefing the press about internal sabotage. Let them, she said. The louder they shout, the more they're hiding. Thora, he warned, Kodiak's not just a place anymore. It's a program. If you go there, you won't come back. She almost smiled. Then at least I'll know what I'm dying for. Static swallowed the rest. By the time she reached Anchorage, snow had started falling, soft, indifferent flakes against the windshield. She loaded supplies, winter gear, batteries, a small satellite phone. Old habits came back like muscle memory, every movement deliberate, efficient. At the docks, a fisherman watched as she approached his boat. He was weathered, eyes clear and curious. You heading out in this? He asked. Need a ride to Kodiak Island, she said. He whistled softly, not much out there these days. Exactly, she replied. He studied her, then nodded, leave before dawn. As she turned to go, he called after her, you Navy. She hesitated, used to be. Then you already know, he said with a small smile, the sea doesn't keep secrets for long. That night she sat on the dock, the compass open in her palm. The moonlight reflected on the needle, steady, defiant. Somewhere out there waited the truth, buried under years of silence, sealed beneath official lies. She thought of her brother, of her father, of every face lost to greed and politics, dressed as patriotism. And she whispered, more to the wind than herself. Justice doesn't wear a uniform. The waves answered softly, carrying her promise across the dark. And as the boat cut through black water the next morning, Thora Brenvik understood that the fight ahead wasn't about survival anymore. It was about redemption, and about proving that honor still had a heartbeat. How do you hunt ghosts on the island that raised you? The sea was steel gray when the boat cut through the channel. Kodiak loomed ahead, dark cliffs, cold wind, the smell of salt and pine. Home and exile. Thora Brenvik stood on deck, hood pulled up, gloved hands gripping the rail. The fisherman at the helm hadn't spoken in hours. He didn't need to. There was a kind of reverence in silence out here, like the water itself demanded it. Every wave felt like memory. Every gust carried voices she thought she'd buried. Her father calling out through the storm. Her brother laughing in the rain. The Coast Guard lights the night, they didn't arrive soon enough. Now she was back where it all began, and maybe where it would end. The boat nudged the dock just after dawn. The air bit sharp. She thanked the captain with a nod and shouldered her pack. No questions asked, the kind of man who understood that answers were dangerous. The town was smaller than she remembered, half the houses shuttered, half the boats gone. But the mountains still looked the same. Unforgiving, unmoved. She walked the frozen main road toward the hills, where an abandoned NOAA research station hid among the trees. That was where the coordinates pointed. That was where Operation Kodiak had started. Snow crunched under her boots, the world muted except for the wind. Every step was a heartbeat closer to truth, and a memory closer to breaking. Inside the facility, dust hung like fog. Desks overturned, rusted metal. Old posters peeling from the walls. But the power was still faintly alive. She could hear the hum in the wires. She flicked on her flashlight. The beam swept across an old generator room, then down a corridor marked authorized personnel only. Her pulse slowed, the familiar rhythm of mission focus. She moved carefully, boots silent, every sound calculated. A keypad beside a sealed door blinked red. She tried a bypass. The code was ancient Navy protocol. The light turned green. The door slid open with a hiss. Cold air. And rows of filing cabinets, computer terminals, data drives sealed in plastic. All marked Project Dagger, Field Research Branch. She exhaled. They'd hidden it in plain sight. She set up her laptop, connecting cables to the dusty servers. The screen flickered to life, blue light reflecting off her face. Years of encrypted logs unraveled line by line, research reports, psych evaluations, field experiments. Then one file stopped her cold. Subject 4 Brenvik Thora E. Status, viability confirmed high. Her throat tightened. She opened it. The first page was dated 15 years earlier, months before she joined the Navy. Observation initiated following survival incident, Kodiak Island. Subject exhibits extreme stress endurance and cognitive resilience following maritime trauma event. Family losses create ideal candidate profile for adaptive warfare conditioning. She felt her stomach drop. The storm. The capsized boat. Her father's death. They'd been watching even then. Another entry, 5 years later. Subject 4 enlisted voluntarily, fulfilling projected behavioral path. Monitor through Bud S selection. Reinforcement through lost stimuli, brother, Afghanistan, casualty code 173. Subject remains unaware of observation program. The room spun. Her brother's death, recorded as reinforcement. Engineered or not, they'd cataloged it like data. She slammed the laptop closed, chest tight. The hum of the generator sounded like a heartbeat in her skull. She whispered to the empty room, "You used us." Her voice echoed off concrete and came back smaller. A sound behind her. The click of a rifle bolt. Step away from the console. She turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway, combat gear, clean, deliberate. Gray hair. Eyes sharp. And on his shoulder, the insignia of a joint command. "Admiral Keller," she said softly. He lowered the weapon but didn't relax. "I knew you'd come," he said. "You were always predictable." Predictable. Her voice was low, dangerous. "You built this program around destroying lives." He shook his head. "Around saving them. You don't understand what Dagger was meant to be." She stepped closer, "Then explain it." He hesitated, studying her. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of belief, the kind that had rotted into justification. "After 9/11, we realized the future of warfare wasn't numbers, it was resilience, psychological endurance. We needed soldiers who wouldn't break under pressure, who'd adapt. Your file was the proof that trauma could be engineered into strength. You survived things that should have killed you, Brenvik. You became the template." She stared, disbelief turning to nausea. "You turned pain into a science project." "Into protection," he countered. "We used what the world gave you." Her jaw clenched. "You killed my brother." His eyes didn't flicker. Collateral in a necessary equation. That was it. The calm inside her broke. She moved before thought, 8 years of reflexes exploding at once. The rifle went wide as she slammed into him, knocking it free. They hit the ground hard. His elbow drove into her ribs, her fist caught his jaw. He was older but trained, still dangerous. Concrete scraped skin, breath turned to growls. He tried to reach the sidearm on his belt. She trapped his wrist, twisted, and heard the pop of bone. He shouted, rage not pain. You can't kill this program, he gasped. It's bigger than both of us. She drove her forearm across his throat, eyes blazing. Maybe, but it ends with you. He struggled once, twice, then went still, breath rasping under the weight of her hold. For a moment, she thought about pulling the trigger, about ending the chain here. But she stopped, because death was too easy. Exposure was harder. She released him, leaving him gasping on the floor. You taught me resilience, she said quietly. You forgot what it means. She grabbed a hard drive from the console, pocketed it, and backed toward the exit. Keller tried to rise. You'll die for this, Brenvik, they'll erase you. She paused in the doorway, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. I already died once, she said. You just didn't notice. Then she was gone. Outside, snow whipped sideways, the world a blur of white and wind. She moved fast through the trees toward the shoreline, heart steady, breath burning. Behind her, alarms began to wail, a metallic scream swallowed by the storm. The drive in her pocket felt heavier than any weapon. Inside it lived the truth, the files, the signatures, the proof of every manipulation. As she reached the cliff's edge overlooking the sea, the sound of rotors grew distant, Black Ops hellos lifting from the facility. They'd try to chase her. They fail. She triggered the small beacon Morales had given her, a one-time signal, a ghost frequency tied to an old NCIS emergency net. If he was still alive, he'd hear it. If not, the ocean would keep her secret. She waited by the shoreline until the snow began to ease. The horizon glowed faintly, the northern lights breaking through cloud, ribbons of green over the dark water. It looked like home used to look before loss. She set the compass on a rock, watching the needle tremble north again. Always north. For the first time, she didn't know if she'd follow it. Hours later, she heard an engine. A small plane descending low, its lights cutting through fog. She smiled faintly. Morales stepped out as it landed, bundled in cold weather gear, face drawn but alive. You never make things simple, he said. Wouldn't be me if I did, she answered. He glanced toward the mountains. So this is where they built it. Where they built me, she corrected. He studied her face, the exhaustion carved deep. You got the proof. She handed him the drive, everything, including their experiments. He took it carefully. You realize what happens if we release this? Yeah, she said, they'll try to bury us. He nodded. Then we better dig the hole first. They loaded into the plane, its engines whining against the wind. As it lifted off, the island fell away beneath them, white, quiet fatting. Thora looked out the window. Down there were ghosts, files, and a version of herself she'd finally outlived. Morales spoke over the roar. You could disappear after this, start over, no one would blame you. She smiled faintly. Disappearing doesn't fix what's broken, exposing it might. He nodded once, then let's make it count. As dawn bled across the horizon, Thora closed her eyes. For the first time in years, sleep came, not as escape, but as surrender to peace earned, not given. The truth was out there now, carried on a single drive, 2 souls against an empire. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was movement. And movement was life. What happens when the truth becomes a weapon, and you're the one holding it? The plane sliced through a gray dawn, its wings trembling against crosswinds. Below, the North Pacific stretched like a mirror of steel. Morales sat in the co-pilot seat, headset on, eyes scanning instruments. Thora watched the horizon silent. The hard drive sat in her lap, wrapped in cloth, heavier than it looked. Neither had spoken since takeoff. Some silences didn't need filling, they needed surviving. Finally, Morales said, "We can't go straight to DC, they'll intercept before we hit airspace." She nodded. "We go indirect, Canada first, then move south, you have contacts." Old ones, journalists. One at the Sentinel, the kind who still remember what truth costs. Thora almost smiled, the kind they stopped promoting. He looked over at her. "You ready for what comes next?" Her fingers tightened on the drive. "No one's ever ready, we just stop running." They landed on a private airstrip outside Vancouver 6 hours later. The snow had turned to rain. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of weather that erased footprints and faces alike. They moved quickly, changing vehicles twice, then settling in a safe house arranged by one of Morales's old contacts, a retired Canadian intelligence officer who asked no questions. Small cabin, no signal, just quiet. Inside, Thora laid out their plan. Step 1, duplicate the data. Step 2, spread it, multiple encrypted drops, different time zones. Even if they silence us, the truth keeps moving. Morales nodded, rubbing his temples. "You've done this before." She met his eyes. "In war, information's the only bullet that doesn't stop when you pull the trigger." He gave a small, tired laugh, "and just as lethal." By nightfall, the cabin glowed with the faint blue of screens. Lines of code scrolled fast as Morales's laptop hummed. Each file duplicated, encrypted, and queued for transfer through secure channels. Thora paced slowly, restless energy building. Her mind kept flashing back to the Admiral's words, "You became the template." She'd been a soldier, a test subject, a ghost, and now she was a threat. The storm outside grew louder. Thunder rolled over the mountains. Morales looked up, "Upload at 60%. She nodded but didn't answer. Her instincts were pulling her elsewhere. Something was wrong. Then she saw it. A flicker on the security monitor. A light, movement near the tree line. "Morales," she said quietly, "we've got company." He froze, eyes flicking to the screen. 2 figures, then 4. Night vision, silhouettes moving like wolves through the snow. "How the hell?" he whispered. "Signal trace," she said. "They found us through the upload." He closed the laptop fast, yanking the drive out. "We have to move." "No," she said calm, "we finish this." "Thora." "Finish it." She turned off the cabin lights, plunging them into darkness. Outside, snow whipped sideways, erasing shapes. She could hear boots crunching, faint radio chatter. Her pulse slowed. The calm before contact. The space between fear and focus, where she always found herself. She moved to the back door, checked her pistol, chambered a round. 10 minutes, Morales whispered. "That's all I need." "Then you get 10. The first man breached through the front window. She saw his shadow before he saw her. A quick step, a flash of muzzle, and silence followed. She didn't need to kill, just disable. Fast, clean, precise. 2 more came through the side door. She dropped low, swept the leg of the first, slammed the second into the frame. Every move was instinct, practiced through years of surviving when she shouldn't have. Morales shouted from the next room, "Upload at 80." She ducked behind the counter as rounds tore through wood. Splinters hit her cheek. She gritted her teeth, firing once, twice. More silence. Snow blew in through broken glass, the smell of gunpowder mixed with pine. Her radio crackled, one of the attacker's channels still open. A voice, "Command, we've got visual. Target confirmed, Brenvik." She froze. They weren't after the data. They were after her. She ran to Morales. "They're not here for you, get the upload done." He shook his head. "We both go." "Negative, you're the courier now, I'll hold them." "Thora." Don't argue with me, Agent. You train me better than that. He met her gaze, saw the steel behind it, and nodded once. Then he shoved the drive into a waterproof pouch, strapped it beneath his coat. Outside, headlights cut through the storm. More vehicles, more men. They were surrounding the cabin. Thora looked around the room. 2 magazines left. 1 exit, back door through the trees. She placed a small charge near the gas line, standard SEAL habit. Not to destroy, but to distract. Go, she said. What about you? I'll follow. She didn't plan to. The explosion lit the forest like dawn. Snow and flame collided in a burst of orange. The attackers scattered, shouting. In the chaos, Morales ran into the trees, into the dark. Thora stayed behind the shattered cabin wall, breathing hard. The firelight flickered across her face. For a moment she saw herself reflected in a shard of glass, blood on her temple, eyes calm. Then she heard it, a new sound. Rotors. A helicopter descended through the storm, its lights slicing through the smoke. She recognized the silhouette immediately, Government Extraction Unit. And stepping out beneath it, Admiral Keller. Impossible. She left him broken in Kodiak. But there he was, flanked by men in tactical armor, face untouched, gaze burning cold. He shouted through the wind, voice amplified through a loudspeaker. Thora Brenvik, you can't win this. Hand over the data and we can fix this quietly. She stepped into the open snow, pistol low at her side. I don't need fixing. He took a step forward, smiling the way only powerful men do when they think they still control the game. You think you're the hero here, he called. You're a footnote. You were designed for this. Even your rebellion was part of the experiment. Her hand tightened on the pistol. You made a mistake, she said softly. You gave me purpose. He tilted his head. Purpose without obedience is chaos. She raised her weapon, eyes steady. Then maybe chaos is justice. The soldiers moved. Gunfire erupted, brief, brutal, deafening. Snow burst around her in white and red. She moved through it like smoke, precision and rage intertwined. 3 down, 4. Her shoulder burned, grazed. She kept moving. But Keller didn't flinch. He just watched, expression calm, as though she were proving his point. When the last echo faded, she stood alone, bloodied, breathing hard, pistol empty. Keller approached slowly. You can't shoot your way out of this, Brenvik. She looked past him, toward the dark forest where Morales had disappeared. Maybe not, she said, voice low, but you can't erase all of us. He smirked. You think that agent can outrun the system. Her lips curved in something between pain and defiance. He doesn't need to outrun it. He just needs 10 more minutes. Keller's smile faltered. What? She tapped the earpiece she'd taken from one of the soldiers. Upload complete. And then behind him, the sky lit again. A second explosion, smaller, but closer to his helicopter. The fuel tanks. The blast knocked them both off their feet. Flame roared upward, snow turning to steam. When the noise faded, Keller was gone, swallowed by fire. Thora lay on her back, chest heaving, the snow melting around her from the heat. The storm howled, carrying ash into the night. She closed her eyes. For a moment, everything was still. Hours later, she woke to the faint hum of static in her earpiece. Morales's voice, broken by interference. File out, multiple drops. News outlets whistle, networks, everything. You did it, Thora, you did it. She smiled weakly, staring at the sky, gray light breaking through the clouds. Her hand found the compass in her pocket. The needle still pointed north. Keep it alive, she whispered. No more ghosts. Static, then silence. She rolled onto her side, body aching, snow soaking through her clothes. The forest beyond the flames was quiet now, peaceful, almost holy. Somewhere far away, alarms would be ringing in offices where truth had been buried for decades. Names being erased, careers ending. But out here, on this frozen ground, there was no sound except wind and the slow, steady rhythm of survival. She sat up, watching dawn break over the ridge. The fire behind her burned low. In its reflection, she saw what she'd become. Not a soldier, not a hero, not even a survivor. Just a reminder that sometimes the system can't cleanse itself. Sometimes it needs someone willing to bleed for it. She stood, body trembling but upright, and whispered to the morning air, "For my brother, for my father, for everyone they tried to use." The wind caught her words, scattering them into the horizon. Then she walked away. No destination, no orders. Just the sound of snow under boots, one step at a time, until the storm swallowed her whole. Because some wars never end with surrender. They end when truth finally breathes, no matter who's left standing. When truth finally surfaces, it doesn't roar. It whispers, and the world decides whether to listen. 3 days after the explosions in the Alaskan wilderness, the story broke. Not as a headline, not as breaking news. It started as a leak, a trickle of classified files that no one could trace, passed through anonymous servers, mirrored across continents before anyone could contain it. Project Dagger. Psychological warfare. Manipulated service records. False authorizations signed by high-ranking officials. For the first 24 hours, the government denied everything. Then the documents hit the press, real names, real signatures, real dates. The denial collapsed. In Washington, Senate committees convened emergency hearings. Cameras flashed. Uniforms filled the witness chairs. Admiral Keller was declared missing, presumed deceased. The official report cited an aircraft malfunction near the Alaskan coast. But inside the closed sessions, away from the microphones, the truth echoed like thunder through a hollow room. Someone had fought back. Someone inside the system had chosen conscience over command. No one said her name. Not publicly. Not yet. But those who'd served long enough, those who still remembered what silence cost, they knew. Her trident had become a ghost symbol. A whisper passed among sailors and Marines who still believed in honor. They called her the North Wind, the one that cut through lies, unseen but felt. Morales vanished too. Officially on extended leave. Unofficially, a ghost with a purpose. He'd scattered the data across encrypted drops, ensuring no single person could erase it all. He'd sent one final message, before disappearing from every database he'd ever touched. You can't kill what the truth has already burned into the world. Months passed. The story dominated for a while, then faded, buried under newer scandals, louder chaos. That's how the world moved on. Not with closure but distraction. But for those who'd been part of it, nothing moved on. The quiet guilt remained. Inside the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, a new plaque appeared on the wall. No name, no date. Just a quote etched into steel. Courage is what remains when obedience ends. No one admitted who put it there. No one removed it either. Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, far from bases and news and wars, a woman lived quietly in a cabin near the water. She used a different name now. No service record. No ID. Her hair had grown longer, streaked with gray at the edges. Every morning she walked down to the rocky beach and watched the tide roll in calm, patient, endless. The world thought she was dead. That was fine. The dead didn't have to explain themselves. She still kept her father's compass on the windowsill. The glass was cracked now, the needle faded, but it still pointed north. Always north. Sometimes in the evenings, she'd hear distant aircraft passing overhead. She never looked up. She didn't need to. She knew the sky belonged to others now. Her fight had never been for control. It had been for clarity. Once she might have believed in redemption. Now she believed in balance, the quiet kind that comes when you've given everything and expect nothing in return. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the pines. The world outside her cabin turned white again, like the island she'd left behind. She was splitting wood one afternoon when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Her muscles tensed instinctively, old habits dying harder than people ever did. A truck stopped by the fence. A man stepped out. Civilian jacket, gloves. She recognized the walk before she saw the face. Morales. Older, leaner, but still alive. He gave her a small nod. You're hard to find. She set down the axe. You weren't supposed to look. He smiled faintly. You didn't make it easy. He handed her a small envelope. No markings, just paper worn at the corners. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, a photo. A group of young sailors standing at attention. All women. All wearing the seal trident. At the bottom, a single handwritten note. They said if she could do it, so could we. For the first time in years, Thora Brenvik felt something crack in her chest. Not pain. Not grief. Something gentler. Something she'd almost forgotten how to name. Recruits, she asked. Morales nodded. First class to graduate since the investigation. They're using your training methods. No one says it out loud, but they know where they came from. She looked down at the photo again. The girls were young, proud, uncertain, fierce. She remembered that look. She remembered believing that loyalty meant safety. Now she knew better. Loyalty was a choice. And it was strongest when no one was watching. They sat outside as the light faded. The sea stretched endless before them, cold and calm. Morales lit a cigarette, offered her one. She shook her head. He exhaled smoke into the wind. They're still cleaning up the mess. More arrests, quiet resignations. Keller's files led to half a dozen shadow contracts. The system's bleeding, but at least it's bleeding in daylight. She nodded, silent. He studied her. You ever think about coming back? Not to fight, to teach. The next generation could use someone like you. She looked at the horizon. The clouds glowed gold where the sun cut through. I already taught them, she said softly, just not in a classroom. He smiled, fair. After a while he stood. You know, they'll tell this story one day. Maybe not your name, but your impact. You'll live in the spaces between their reports. Good, she said. That's where truth belongs. He placed a hand on her shoulder, then started toward the truck. Stay safe, Thora. She didn't correct him this time. As he drove away, she turned back to the water. The waves kept coming. Always coming. That night, as wind rattled the windows, she sat at her table and opened an old notebook. Its pages were blank. She hadn't written in years, too many secrets, too many silences. Now she began to write. Not a report. Not an apology. A story. For whoever came after. For those who still believed that duty and truth could coexist. For those who hadn't yet been broken by the weight of both. She wrote until her hand cramped. Until the fire went out. Until the dawn crept through the window and turned the ocean silver. When she finished, she closed the notebook and placed it beside the compass. 2 relics. 2 guides. One of direction. One of memory. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. No signature. Inside, a single newspaper clipping. Whistleblower testimony triggers Pentagon ethics reform. Below the headline, a quote stood alone in italics. Honor doesn't wear a uniform, it wears scars. Unknown SEAL operator. Thora smiled. It wasn't fame. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was enough. She folded the clipping and slipped it into the back of the notebook. Outside, the waves broke softly against the rocks. The sky was pale blue. The air smelled of salt and pine, and something cleaner, something like peace. Later that day, a young woman knocked on her door. Civilian clothes. But the stance upright, shoulders squared, told its own story. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am," the girl said, voice nervous. "I was told you might be someone who could help me train. I'm trying out for Bud S next year." Thora studied her for a long moment, the corner of her mouth curving into the faintest smile. "What's your name?" "Daniels, Lee Daniels." "You sure you want that kind of pain, Daniels?" The girl didn't flinch. "Yes, ma'am." Thora opened the door wider. "Then come in. The ocean's still the best teacher I know." That evening, as the two of them stood by the shoreline, the younger woman asked softly, "Is it true what they say about the one who stood up to her commander, the one they called the North Wind?" Thora didn't answer right away. She looked out over the water where sunlight met waves endless, moving untamed. "They say a lot of things," she said finally. "What do you believe?" The girl thought about it, that it takes more courage to tell the truth than to survive a bullet. Thora nodded slowly, eyes distant, then believed that. They stood in silence a while longer, the tide creeping closer, the cold biting their skin. But neither moved. The water lapped at their boots like memory returning home. And when the sun finally slipped beneath the horizon, Thora Brenvik turned to the young woman beside her, a reflection of everything she'd once been, and smiled. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't alone in the fight. She was part of a legacy. One that didn't need medals, headlines, or approval. Just conviction. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And when it's done, the world changes, quietly, completely, forever.